All right. Welcome back, everyone. If you're joining us for the first time, then we're glad you found us. And for those of you who were here last week, you might recall that as we were wrapping up, I said, we'll be discussing comfort and it will fit with the observation of the day. Well, we are discussing comfort, and the observation of the day is that it's food day. Get it? Comfort, food? Yeah? No? Dang it. All right. Well, puns aside, we're going to be discussing a couple different types of comfort, specifically natural comfort and comfort provided by mechanical ventilation. We're also going to be joined by Voya, who you see up there, Mila Shinovich of LG Air Conditioning Technologies, for a presentation, a discussion, and Q&A on quality control challenges and cold weather performance. Now, you know who's comfortable talking about housing? Sam Rashkin. That's because he is the former chief architect at DOE's Building Technologies office, but he is now focused on creating and teaching the content for the Housing 2.0 program. That content is based largely on Sam's book, Housing 2.0, A Disruption Survival Guide. Now, the full program was established to help empower you, our building professionals, to design and construct higher performance, healthier, more sustainable homes at a fraction of the cost. Sam's going to lead today's seminar, but he's also going to address your questions at the end. Before we get started, though, we have some sponsors that we're very comfortable talking about. The first is Schneider Electric, who is driving the digital transformation of modern homes with smart and sustainable energy solutions for ultimate comfort and energy efficiency. Their connected home ecosystem of smart energy management solutions provides digital control of energy use throughout a home, from the grid via their smart electrical panel to their connected wiring devices. Next, we have Jinko Solar. They are a leading PV module manufacturer and energy storage system integrator. The company has deployed more than 100 gigawatts of their Eagle modules in 160 countries globally, including more than 17 gigawatts right here in the United States. Eagle Storage brings together the best energy storage technology for turnkey hardware and energy storage services. Now, we also have Panasonic Healthy Indoor Living Solutions. They're helping builders across the country differentiate themselves with powerful, code-compliant, and cost-effective indoor air quality solutions that provide a safer environment for home buyers. And finally, our newest sponsor, of which Voya is a part of, is LG HVAC and Air Conditioning Technologies. As a leading proponent of the electrification movement, LG is proud to pave the way with arguably the broadest portfolio of home electrification products. From air-to-air and air-to-water heat pumps for HVAC, water heaters, clothes dryers, and washer-dryer combos, all the way to advanced energy storage systems, EV chargers, and super efficient appliances, including the industry's first Energy Star certified induction cooktop, LG's innovation and technology will help us promote decarbonization and collectively create a better life for all. Now, during the course of today's presentation, you can submit questions for Sam or Voya. Simply use the questions box inside the GoToWebinar control panel. I'm going to review those questions and I'll pose those to Sam or Voya after they are done. All right, I'm going to ask everyone else to get comfortable while Sam proceeds.
Hey, thank you, Mike. And like Mike, I could not be more grateful for our sponsors, Panasonic, Schneider Electric, Jinko Solar, and LG Air Conditioning Technologies. This is a unique program about how to deliver better homes for lower cost. And this unique set of sponsors recognize how important it is for high performance professionals to be leaders in the industry, and you can't if you don't also address the total user experience for new housing. So we're so excited to have them. And today's topic is a really special one. We're going to talk about comfort today, and comfort matters. We're going to tie together a lot of loose ends that we cover across the Housing 2.0 curriculum and kind of look at comfort really is much more than just designing a heating cooling system. It really is a larger comfort as a system approach that we want to cover today. So when we say comfort as a system, the three key parts that we think about or should be thinking about is first, you start with the enclosure, thermal control, airflow control, moisture control. When you get that right versus get it wrong, everything flips. It's a complete change in terms of what the requirements of the comfort system are and the brute force you need to manage the comfort. Next part that's often missed is design. How significant how we design our homes is relative to the comfort we get and the quality of the comfort we get. So we're going to talk about natural heating, natural cooling, natural light, natural fresh air. Again, like I said, we're going to tie a lot of loose ends that we cover across the curriculum for Housing 2.0 here today. And the third part that kind of closes the deal, the absolute critical part, once you get the first two right, is the heating cooling solutions. And with the heating, ventilation, air conditioning, we have to really figure out what to do with low load systems that heretofore have not been as critical when enclosures weren't as good. We have to think about quality installation. There's tremendous data about the marketplace and how the preponderance of faults in installations is pretty scary. We'll talk about that later. And also in any locations where you get humid, not just the hot, humid southeast, any places that have extended humid weather conditions across summer for 3 or 4 months, we have to think about dehumidification. It also has to do with the fact we have very low load homes, very good enclosures. We have longer swing seasons. We have shorter cycles. We have to figure out what to do when we don't get as much accidental dehumidification from the heating cooling system that help manage the humidity. So this is the comfort as a system strategy. We'll get to it with these topics: enclosure and comfort, design and comfort, HVAC and comfort, and then optimizing comfort recommendations. And it's great that we have Voya here today. He and I were in Dallas yesterday doing an in-person workshop, and he brings so much insight. We're going to have him really talk about bringing all this together and really innovation on these advanced heating cooling technologies that can kind of close the deal. And then we'll go into discussion, address your questions like we usually do with each seminar. So let's jump right in to the first topic, enclosure and comfort. This is where the rubber meets the road. You know, what you do in the front end, in the choices you make, in the enclosure you provide, really sets the stage for comfort. In many cases, things can be so rough, it makes it really challenging, sometimes almost impossible for the heating cooling system to ensure full comfort year round. So here's where we are coming from. You know, over the last stretch of time, we've been doing Energy Star and had a privilege to work on Zero Energy as well. We've moved from low performance enclosures. And here was the challenge with low performance enclosures. First of all, we would often put the heating cooling system in an unconditioned attic, which is a nightmare for comfort. You know, attics can get up to 120, 170 degrees, depending where you are and how hot your summer conditions are. That is a nightmare setting for a heating cooling system, the air handler, the equipment itself, and the ductwork. You know, 45% losses are common. We'll talk about that. And it just is just such a handicap if this is how the enclosure is set up, so that the only place left for the heating cooling system, the ducts and equipment, is in the unconditioned attic. So that's number one. Number two, we had, with low performance enclosures, all these incomplete thermal barrier conditions. So we might have, in this case, an attic hatch, either with a flimsy piece of fiberglass that eventually, after a few access events up to the attic, would become ineffective if it was effective in the first place. We have the ducts themselves that go into the attic. Each one of them is a thermal hole, and shafts and all sorts of other openings where you're not insulated. We have a Swiss cheese virtually of thermal barrier breaks where there's no air conditioning. And think about it. If it's 140 in the attic, the air in these ducts, when the system's not running and cycling off, quickly gets over 100 degrees, and it wants to go from more to less and drift into the house where it's 70 degrees. So you have almost like a cycling effect of the attic heating air that can get in the house until the system's operating, the fans push conditioned air and overcome these losses. So it's just a nightmare of a strategy to build this way to optimize comfort. It just doesn't work. The next issue we have, we've discussed this before during the performance module, is with conventional construction, insulation on the flat, in the ceiling, unvented attic, we have no topside air barrier. So the performance of the insulation without a topside air barrier is so much less than when you have a 6-sided assembly that we learn every day we take building science training. We have virtually half the air barrier missing with traditional construction. So under any kind of, if there's even a mild wind and the attic's pressurized, there's constant natural driving forces for the air in the attic that's pressurized to move through the fibrous insulation, which is not an air barrier, and make the ceiling hotter, and then also where it can find holes, create a thermal connection. And again, comfort with unvented attics is a huge hit, so we have to recognize that. The next thing we have to recognize is we have an incomplete interior air barrier. Again, all of the Swiss cheese of openings for duct boots and for access panels and for recessed lighting and fans, bathroom fans, kitchen fans. There's just amazing number of penetrations that avoid a complete interior air barrier. And then we have in homes that aren't built to the latest codes and these high performance programs like Zero Energy Ready, Home, and Energy Star, we have much less insulation R value, and we have less oversight, inspections, and testing to make it make sure it's a quality installed thermal barrier. And then we have sub-optimized windows. Windows are a huge difference, especially the colder and colder we get. And finally, we have these leaky assemblies in low performance enclosures. A normal 5.7 ACH50 home that we were starting with, and worse back then, would be equivalent to like a 10-inch opening in a wall, just where air can just blow in and out. In the winter, air escape that's warm. In the summer, hot air come in, and it's virtually a 10-inch hole in a 5.7 ACH50 home. And this is the setting we say to the HVAC installer and trades, give me comfort. It's a huge hit when we don't optimize enclosure. So the reason last week we spent so much time in optimizing enclosure is we fix all this. So with an optimized enclosure, a high performance enclosure, this is what I recommended last week, this kind of solution. We want to first have the HVAC system in the conditioned space. And notice that last week we spent a lot of time highly recommending transitioning to a unvented attic. And what's amazing also, we'll talk about with a high performance enclosure, is you have hardly any duct runs and much, much smaller equipment. We'll talk about the sizing later as well. But we have a smaller system that's so much lower cost, much lower, much less expensive duct system at much lower cost, much better airflow, much better comfort. Incredible what happens once we make a better enclosure. So what is that better enclosure? Well, first we have a complete thermal barrier. Now, it's a complete difference from what I'm showing you here and the solutions we addressed in the Performance Matters module last week that create this incredibly superior thermal protection. I encourage all of you who haven't seen last week's module, you can go view the recording and see how we get here, but this is night and day in terms of creating almost like a Yeti cooler versus just like a big open basket where heat can come in and out. So complete thermal barrier. Then we have a complete exterior barrier. Get rid of all that Swiss cheese of things going through and openings and trying to manage it and all those penetrations. You're left to the only penetrations are usually the plumbing stack, one or two that go through the attic, maybe an exhaust fan may go through if it doesn't go through the soffit, but it's so minimized, it's so far superior. And then we have a complete interior barrier as well. So we mitigate that whole vented attic condition with the missing top side air barrier. Then we have much more optimized installation quantity to the latest codes, and it's verified in high performance programs to be a grade 1 high quality installation. And you can lose 40 to 70% of the rated R value just from poor quality installation practices. What a huge difference. We optimize the windows, and then when we do airtight assemblies, that 10-inch hole gets shrunk down to something like around 4 inches net for the whole house. Even a passive house might be 2 or 3 inches, but it's incredibly less infiltration losses and gain. It's just far, far better. So the outcomes, the perception of comfort when you walk in this kind of enclosure is just a vast different experience. The surfaces are cooler in summer, warmer in winter. If you remember from last week, surface temperatures have 40% greater impact on perceived comfort than the ambient air temperature. So what a huge difference. The HVAC thermal losses are reduced from 45%, as high as 45%, excuse me, down to almost zero. The superior noise reduction and the ultra low bills, because this enclosure just barely sips BTUs to keep it comfortable in the summer and the winter. So this is, just huge. I'm not going to go through everything we do to get here. Again, if you want to get to this optimized enclosure, go view last week's session on performance matters. The whole focus, most of it on my end, was about how do you get to this solution. Let's talk a little bit about just what happens when you don't. On the left, you see what happens when you're missing air barriers that drop ceilings. In the winter, in an infrared image, dark colors are cold, light colors are warm. You see the cold attic virtually is permeating everywhere. Creating comfort in this space will be a huge challenge. I don't know how much brute force you have to throw at these cold surface temperatures through the air conditioning system or the heating cooling system to get comfort. On the right, it's the opposite. It's the summer, and with the missing air barrier, the 130, 40 degree attic is permeating through the fibrous insulation. You have virtually a thermal bypass, and you have all these hot surfaces, again, creating a real challenge to manage comfort. And then we talked about how important slab edge insulation is. A lot of builders don't want to do it because it's a little bit of an expense. In some cases, the local jurisdictions forbid it because there's concerns about termite penetration into the wood framed assemblies. There are solutions, things that can be done, subject for another day, but the key thing is you have to recognize that the slab edge is like this thermal highway for BTUs to flow out in the winter and in the summer. The infrared image on the right just shows you have a good wall assembly, but you have this absolute glowing slab edge showing evidence of all that heat loss going through, coming from inside in the winter. So, this is the enclosure details are profoundly important. Of course, thermal bridging. Here you have even a fairly reasonable framed assembly in terms of thermal bridging, and compare it to a SIPS home on the right. It's night and day. It's a Yeti cooler versus a very porous kind of bucket to carry, try to keep food cold in when you go out on a picnic or go to an event. It's just, until you see thermal images, sometimes it's just not clear how powerful thermal bridging is at disrupting the enclosure and then the impact on comfort. And then you can see from the inside the same thing, the ghosting, the studs showing through, thermal bridging. In this case, you're inside, you see the cold temperatures outside by virtue of the heat escaping through the studs, creating the ghost marks that you see on the inside. And then band joints are like an absolute critical factor in why we have cold floors. Band joints insulation is so tough to do. You have the framing coming across, and then after we have to try to pack an insulation at each framing bay along the enclosure perimeter. It's a very difficult detail. Builders don't want to spend the extra cost for the closed cell foam insulation. So this is a common experience where you see heat exploding out of the floors, which means cold floors. I'd say virtually every house in the 450 home neighborhood I live in would evidence this thermal image because it was constructed without band joist insulation. And then you have the ultimate comfort nightmare, the bonus room over the garage. This is like, just as, to go to an HVAC trade and say, give me comfort in this room, is just setting him up or she up for a real challenge to solve the problem. The reason the bonus room is a nightmare, if you think about it as a box, 5 of the 6 surfaces are exposed to the outside. You have the one wall adjoining the house that has a conditioned room on the other side, but the top, the roof, the side walls are exposed to an unconditioned attic. You have the floor over unconditioned garage, and then you have the outside wall in front, facing the front, exposed to the outside weather as well. 5 of 6 surfaces. Most rooms will have 1 or 2, possibly 3 surfaces. This room has 5. And then the floor insulation below that goes in often sags and drops, and you have complete thermal bypass around the floor insulation, so that virtually its effectiveness might be where you lose 60–70% of whatever the R value is that goes in the floor. And so you have, again, really cold floors, thermal bypass. You have the attic knee walls, which often are missing the air barrier on the backside facing the attic. And knee walls are a challenge anyway. They often are leaky, have tremendous losses. And then the doors to the little storage space that are provided, which is in the unconditioned attic, is a huge thermal hole. We are just creating a massive challenge for an HVAC company to come in and say, I can deliver comfort to this room. It's just a comfort nightmare. And then the next nightmare are decks and balconies that extend from inside to outside. They're often missing, again, the insulation. If it's slab construction, as you see here, it will be a virtual, almost, again, beyond huge funnel of heat going outside on a constant basis. If it's not a slab, the wood framing details are very difficult to create the thermal solution between the balcony and the house. Really big challenges that create lots of comfort risk for the rooms next to those balconies. Here's one building that should really interest you. I like showing it because it's the epitome of losing control of comfort. This is Aqua in Chicago. It's a beautiful undulating set of balconies, architecturally very interesting, but thermally it's a nightmare. When I saw this building in Chicago, I said, there's got to be an infrared image of it. And sure enough, I found the image of this exact wall you're looking at. And those, you should look at those balconies as the most effective heat transfer mechanism for getting the heat in the winter outside to the exterior, and in the summer getting the heat outside to the interior. In effect, I look at this building more as like you're designing a radiator, which is optimized to get heat into the room. Well, this is almost like a huge radiator designed to get the heat out of the building in the summer and into the winter. And notice every wall is 100% glass, so it has hardly any thermal performance. I just can't imagine what the comfort bills are for this kind of solution for a high-rise housing. And then last thing I think in comfort I want to talk about in terms of the enclosure is how important the windows are in cold climates. Virtually, they're, again, this huge funnel for heat flow out. Last week we showed, you can lose like 60–70% of the R value as the walls get more and more high performance if you don't match up the high performance wall with a really equally high performance window. So in a cold climate, if I have an R28–30 wall, you want to have a triple glaze window, or you will compromise like 40–50% of the frame wall assembly that you built. So you get the idea what I'm saying. The enclosure sets the stage. You have to get that right. And the next part is, what can design do for you? Design and comfort. And so the ancient Indians who built the cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde 1,100 years ago had it all figured out. They knew that nature was there with abundance, providing free heat in the winter, free cooling in the summer. All they had to do was situate their residential communities on south-facing cliffs. And what happens, of course, is in the winter, the low sun comes through, it heats the thermal mass, adobe construction all day long. Through the penetrations, it heats the interior thermal mass, and all night you have this radiant surface temperatures that are warm, creating tremendous comfort. And the day the cycle continues over. In the summer, the cliff is such that it blocks all the sun from hitting the adobe. The cool diurnal, the huge diurnal swing with very cold nighttime temperatures allows the mass to get so cool that during the day, it basically provides the surface temperatures that create day-round comfort, year-round comfort. Not a single electron or fossil fuel BTU is consumed to create the comfort, all natural. In contrast, we look at city center in Las Vegas and the desert where 6 months a year it's way above 90, 4 months a year it's above 100. It's just insane that this is the solution for how we build buildings that ignores comfort. In this building, year-round comfort, no fossil fuel, no electricity. In this building, if there's a power outage, you will die in these buildings if you don't get out of them within 3, 4, or 5 hours. It's just going to overheat. It requires such brute force. So we can do better with natural comfort. Now, for those of you that have been around longer than others, you will recognize natural comfort as a concept we used to call passive solar. I don't use passive solar because the word passive tends to be negative, and words are free. We talk about this when we discuss optimizing sales. Why would I use the word passive that implies low energy, lack of effort? It's such a negative term to apply to something so important. And we know, on the other hand, where the universe of consumers out there all would perceive passive as negative, 100% of them probably think things natural are good. So my recommendation is choose the words that are powerful, that create value. So natural comfort's what I do. Enough about that. And there are 4 components to natural comfort: natural heating, natural cooling, natural lighting, natural fresh air. And what happens is they all use this common set of tools to get it. I'll show you how that works in a minute. So I'm not going to go through that right column for just a minute, but I want to just show you the user experience benefits. When you say, I have all this abundance of natural comfort through the sun and the wind that are for free. What happens when I leverage that? Well, first I wound up with glare-free views like you see on the left versus no view on the right. And there are only 3 reasons we put windows in a building. One is for daylight, one is for views, and one is for fresh air, to open and get air. So probably the view is the most important of those reasons for windows. And on the right, we've completely blocked the most important reason for the window because it's not addressing the glare. So glare-free views is a freebie if you design with natural comfort. Next experience you have is really low bills. This analysis done in California looked at what would happen if we just oriented buildings south. Forget all the other tools we're going to talk about for thermal mass and shading and other solutions. Let's just orient buildings correctly. And so they looked at the light blue bars are for coastal locations and the dark blue bars are for inland locations. And if I would just summarize without going through the detail of the bars, generally you're looking at 25% free heating and cooling just by getting south orientation correct. And that's just a freebie for doing the right thing, north-south orientation of our homes. And then the impact of thermal mass is it's like a thermal battery. Even when you design a good natural comfort home, there's so much sun coming in the winter, you have the possibility of overheating. So you use your thermal battery, the thermal mass, to store and to stretch and give legs to the comfort. So after the sun sets, all that heat can be released and you're getting this free heating many, many, many more hours after the day is done. So, and then most importantly is the power of that surface temperature being so comfortable. Mean radiant temperature has 40% greater impact on perceived comfort than ambient air, as you mentioned earlier. And then the natural light. If you don't close the blinds, if you have the right orientation and you can let the natural light in, it is an amazing boost to wellness. Vitamin D is greater, wards off seasonal depression, improves sleep, better productivity. This is a Harvard Business Review study. And I look at where my pets always every day hang out. It's like they know just intuitively how they're just smart and know daylight is so healthy. So optimizing natural light is a huge benefit of getting natural comfort integrated in your design. And then you can see the daylight difference when you do it right, when you do it wrong. So on the left, you have when you manage daylight and shading and orientation, you have this beautiful views, you have a beautiful daylight coming in. On the right, the same kind of configuration, all the blinds closed. And human tendency it's not to change every day. It's easier just to leave the blinds closed. 98% of home builders, designers, architects scored natural light top home feature in 2022. So it's a huge benefit people recognize. I think it's time as designers we integrate it very carefully in our designs. And then fresh air is just crazy improvement to wellness as well. We all know it when houses get stuffy, we want fresh air. There's so many days in swing seasons, maybe 4 or 5 months a year when it's crazy to run your ventilation system and not just open your windows. That fresh air just coming in just feels great, notwithstanding there's some pollen issues and things that can come up, and that's where your ventilation system is going to be real helpful. But there's so many months when the fresh air is just so superior just to relying on trying to drag in 60, 70 CFM. With the ventilation, you want to have both. And so what fresh air does, it eliminates the stale air, removes dust by diluting it, it accumulates in the homes, improves concentration and health. So we know this. I think this is a Mayo Clinic study that found those results. And so here we are with all these experiences: glare-free views, free heating and cooling, superior comfort, natural light, fresh air, and the resilience. You know, our spaces can float, and even if there's a power failure, because of the natural comfort, we have more extended time, even with a supply outage, where we stay comfortable. And what's that all worth? And I estimate about tens of thousands of dollars. But of course, it's a hard one to explain. It's not that hard if we make the effort. Everyone wants fresh air, natural light, good comfort, free low bills. I mean, we just have to recognize the benefits and then translate them at sale. And the cost of it is where I go crazy. It costs no more to do all this. Exploiting free resources, the sun and the wind, cost you zero. And the argument from builders will be, well, but I'm given my lots, what can I do? And I can tell you, you can recognize the laws of probability are that 25% of your lots will be with a south rear elevation, 25% of your lots will be with a south front elevation. So have your design options for those lots that leverage natural comfort. 50% of your lots, this will be a great strategy. And remember I said you had these basic suite of tools for how you use natural comfort: orientation, shading, thermal mass, prevailing breeze orientation, and capture, and cool roofs. So for natural heating, you're doing orientation, thermal mass. For natural cooling, all of those tools serve to create a far superior cooling outcome. And then for fresh air, it's prevailing breeze, orientation, and capture. And natural lighting, again, is going to be orientation and shading. So the 6 basic tools get you all these benefits: natural heating, natural cooling, natural fresh air, natural lighting. So the reason it all works is because the sun has a absolutely set way it moves across the year. In the summer, it rises in the northeast, it sets in the northwest, and it's much, much higher in the sky, something like 70 degrees, 65, 68, 72 degrees slope down to the house. In the winter, it's at its slowest, maybe 30-degree slope into your house. And it rises in the southeast and it sets in the southwest. So much smaller arc, the days are shorter. We all know this kind of way the path of the sun works across the year. It's just the way the planets and how we rotate and everything works. So orientation optimizes access and control of the sunlight. East-west, so when you have south, you have the maximum control, maximum access. When we're east-west orientation, we have the least access and the least control. And in north orientation, basically we get diffuse light and the sunlight is less of a factor helping or hurting us. So let's look at what we can do. First thing is in subdivisions. It costs no more to lay out streets so they create north-south orientation. This concept sketch shows 100% north-south blocks. It's easy to do. We leverage the $10,000 of value, and the outcome will be homeowners will experience over 30 years of mortgage, tens of thousands of dollars of savings on the utility bill. And let's say I mentioned again, you have 50% of your lots, you have two options. One will be facing south in front, one in the rear, and 25% will be in the rear. So if I have a front facing south home, I can have this configuration, set for the homes on those lots. In this case, if it's a one-story home, I can use a sawtooth configuration, get light both into the back of the home and the front of the home. Again, you notice the overhangs block the summer sun, let in the winter sun. Thermal mass might be in the floors, the counters, fireplaces, whatever it may be, all to store and kind of be a battery so the comfort can extend way past when sun sets. Very simple. You see a solution here on the right, what that might look like. And when the back of the house, the backyard faces south, we may make that wall higher, put a trellis in the middle. So again, we're blocking the sun in the summer, we're letting the sun in the winter. Again, thermal mass for controlling comfort. And here on the right, you might see a look of how we use the trellis and the high wall and the rear elevation to create all this extra comfort and lighting and just free heating and cooling. It's beautiful when you see it in action. In contrast to this, so this is a house in Orlando. You see all the blinds are closed. It's virtually no consideration for orientation, so we have no choice. We can't let that sun just all morning or all afternoon just blow into the house, so we leave the blinds closed all day. In contrast to a friend of mine's house, Paul Torcellini, he works for a National Renewable Energy Lab, but works out of Connecticut. So here's his house. Notice in the summer, and the winter rather, how the sunlight's just pouring in, creating all this natural comfort, natural heating all winter long. Then you go summer, and look how completely the overhang shades both the windows and the walls. It might be 90 degrees outside, but the air next to the wall might be 75 degrees. And so you get that benefit, plus you have no sun coming through, so it's like a zero solar heat gain coefficient. No sun is hitting the windows. What a comfort advantage. The house I designed in 1982, this is, I was living in Sacramento, California. This is in Chico, this house, California. Again, you can see everything shaded, wing walls, a lot of other details, thermal mass, all these details make a huge difference. Speaking of thermal mass, you need about 5 square feet for every 1 square foot of aperture of window that's collecting light. And you may need a little less today with throughout the house we use the low E windows, we have less sun coming in. So you can reduce that ratio probably down in half. But anyway, this is kind of just a rule of thumb for how much mass you need. And people say that's a lot of thermal mass. It's easy to integrate in floors and counters and fireplaces, lots of ways we can get mass. And then those surface temperatures just are your comfort enhancer. Just everything feels better with that. And then, capturing the prevailing breeze and the natural fresh air, the obvious best solution is cross ventilation. That will give you the best. If you can get 2 openings and 2 adjoining walls, adjacent walls, that's next best. Good would be 2 openings in the same wall. If you have no way to get additional opening on another wall, but separate the openings. And you're going to get hardly any natural ventilation if it's just one big opening, because the air coming in won't have a way to let the air get out, another opening, so it tends to neutralize and minimize the flow. So you know how to get the most, and we can apply that. Let's look at cross ventilation. And again, there are solutions for what you do. The high windows don't work. They don't create airflow that creates comfort. Low windows work better. High and low, you don't want to come in high and go out low. You come in low and go out high, because the natural tendency is the air comes in, gets a little warmer to rise, and it amplifies the exhaust air going out and really creates extra ventilation coming in the home. And if you have a sawtooth configuration, you don't want the sawtooth to face the same direction as the air coming in. So if your strategy is emphasizing fresh air, you would have it face the other way, notwithstanding the solution we showed you earlier to get the sunlight deeper into the space. So sometimes you have to balance these different natural resource opportunities. And normally I would face the sawtooth the same way as the south direction, but if your emphasis is on natural fresh air, this would give you the most. The big thing is that studies have found even with just slight winds, less than 2 miles an hour, you can lower the indoor temperature as much as 5 degrees Fahrenheit, free air conditioning. And a great application, of course, is the historic Charleston town center, where the homes from the Revolutionary era are still intact. And it's amazing, beautiful city to see, because one of the historic buildings, but people, even unconsciously, are just probably recognizing these homes are built to optimize comfort. They're facing the prevailing breeze coming from the ocean. They have a long, narrow configuration in that direction, so they capture the most breezes, and they have cross ventilation, they have high windows, they do all the techniques, but they had to. Back in the late 1700s, early 1800s, there was no air conditioning. There wasn't air conditioning until Carrier developed it in the early 1900s. And so you would have no chance at comfort unless you did this. So virtually, as you go through the entire downtown, you see this beautiful solution of natural comfort. And I think it really resonates with people. It could be subliminal, but we get it. When you're in Charleston, not only are these homes beautiful, they're beautiful because they respond to the climate they're in. And then we go to the next option, which is if all we can do is have windows in one wall, because this room may have other rooms on either side, what do we do? And so if it's the windows on one wall, we can actually choose which way a casement window opens, or use wing walls to create completely different outcomes in terms of fresh air. And we're going to show you one example, and then show you the pictures of the rest. But you have a wing wall here, and this is the prevailing direction. That wing wall is kind of blocking the wind into the space. This wing wall is blocking the wind from coming into this window, so you can create negative pressure that enhances the flow through the space and out. If the wing wall is on this side, blocking the wind coming in, you have positive pressure on both sides, and you would neutralize the fresh air flow coming into the space. Hopefully you get what I'm saying. And so there are lots of ways you can configure it, but the point is not to give you the solution right now, but to show you the power of design, if it's thoughtful, to create solutions that enhance comfort. Now, if we can get the apertures, get the windows on 2 adjacent walls, the same thing happens. So here you have the windows on adjacent walls, and we use the same casement window orientations or wing walls to create positive pressure that lets the flow come in one window, block it so it doesn't go in the other window, negative pressure, and you optimize flow. So we won't go through every orientation, but I want to just show you design is a powerful tool. If you actually think about your free gift, the abundance of wind and sun, and how you're going to integrate that in your design. And then the designs are beautiful. When you look at them and you see designs, just like I mentioned in Charleston, when you do this, and we're even a lay a person without knowledge about natural comfort or passive solar, we get that this is a beautiful solution. Lastly, on natural comfort is cool roofs. The big thing about cool roofs is that they have a higher reflectance. So where an attic may get up to 130 with a normal asphalt shingle roof, if I use a cool roof, it will be 40 degrees cooler, much less thermal gradient, therefore much less pressure on comfort with warmer ceilings and more heat loss with heating cooling systems that might be up there. So often a very great solution in an existing home with the ducts in the attic, and you're kind of stuck because you're not building a new home, is replace, and you have significant cooling loads, replace, when it's time to replace your roof, specify a cool roof. They don't cost any more, higher reflectivity, and up to 40-degree reduced attic temperatures. And just to give you an example how beautiful it is, here on the left, we're not optimized for the very hot climates in Melbourne, Australia, and the prevailing black roof aesthetic that they have there is crazy. In contrast, in Bermuda, where it gets brutally hot for really long stretches, the white roofs are just this amazing improvement in comfort. And that's why everywhere you go, you see these white roofs. It's kind of become the symbol of Bermuda, and it's beautiful because it creates so much value in these homes with natural cooling. And here's a cool roof, and you can't tell the difference between a cool roof and a normal shingle roof. So I just want to have a good friend, Vivian Lofness from Carnegie Mellon, who calls this environmental surfing, which is a great term. But I wanted to show you her diagrams, show how all this plays. So without a high performance enclosure or high efficiency, you have this heating load. You know, in January, it drops into May, September, it starts getting up, and it increases to January. And this is for commercial buildings, but it would be very similar to residential, but different. And then when we go to a high performance enclosure, you know, windows and walls and air barriers we talked about, we have this amazing transformation in the enclosure and how it works. So we reduce the heating loads so they're much lower, and the system is off for much longer swing season when we don't need it. And it starts in October instead of September. It stops in mid-April instead of mid-May. And so it's lower, longer swing seasons. Then we add the natural comfort. And now we've gone from this curve to this curve. It might be a 60–70% reduction in your net requirements for heating and cooling. And so this is heating, cooling is the same thing. Without efficiency, you have cooling going way up in summer. Since it's commercial buildings, you tend to have year-round cooling that tends to happen. So in contrast to residential, it would drop off. So you had none in April and none, let's say, mid-October, but it's the same basic kind of curve. And then with a high performance enclosure, it drops like 30%. And then with natural comfort and natural fresh air, you get this huge reduction. So everything we just discussed, this is what we're doing. And we're shrinking the requirements. We're getting all these natural comfort features. And that brings us, finally now we're ready for the heating cooling supplier, installer to do their magic. We're giving them a baseline that is massively better. And the risk factors, the quality, the noise, the cost, everything is lower. So here's why you should be concerned. Under normal construction, when we tested hundreds of homes and went in and inspected systems, this is National Renewable Energy Laboratory went out and did an extensive survey looking at existing installations, heating, cooling. It was a nightmare to see the outcomes. 30–93% systems, equipment were oversized, which means shorter cycles, higher costs. It means a lot of less effective dehumidification. It's just insane how oversized, how frequent the occurrence of oversizing was happening. Refrigerant charge was low, almost 30–80% of the time. And duct leakage was a problem 2/3 to 100% of the time, and airflow, in terms of good, well-designed duct systems and proper flow, was low 50 to over 90% of the time. At Houston, we have a problem. The HVAC installation infrastructure is not set up to deliver high quality installation. It has to do with we don't size and lay out duct systems as rigorous as we should. The installer is not being held accountable. There aren't, absence of like Energy Star version 3 quality installation requirements. You have almost no checks going on, and this is the kind of the skill challenge we have with the existing HVAC infrastructure. So we mentioned when the ducts are in unconditioned attics, that's 10 to 45% additional thermal losses. Where we have leakage on the return side, you have this horrible environment of dust and moisture that can seep into your ducts and then be distributed through your house. And we have to start first by getting design right and then quality right, and that you do via commissioning. So in design, really calculating the heating, cooling loads, taking into account all the key factors. We'll talk about those in a second. On the equipment, you want to specify that equipment that meets the loads. You want to then design compact duct layouts if you have a high performance enclosure, and in humid climates, you need to figure out what you're going to do with a high latent capacity, especially with longer swing seasons and shorter cycles. And so dehumidification has to be a part of the design strategy. Commissioning, you want to ensure proper airflow, proper refrigerant charge, and you want to just measure that the airflow is getting into all the rooms. So essentially, this is what we do with the Energy Star version 2 and Zero Energy Ready Home program. The Zero Energy Ready Home program goes a step further and requires the ducts in the conditioned space. A huge, huge upgrade from Energy Star version 3. If for no other reason, everyone should be doing Zero Energy Ready Home, do it for that reason. Okay, I want to talk about load calculations. The huge impact a lot of factors have that are not consistently accounted for in the sizing. The location, the approximate conditioned area. People get the basement really confused whether it's conditioned or not conditioned. Lots of other confusion happens with designs that are complicated. Orientation, the mechanical system location, in or out of conditioned space, wall glass and roof specifications. So many things happen in the sizing when it's done quickly without rigor that often we don't see consistent high quality sizing results. Let me give you two examples that will show you how impactful this is. Orientation and location in or out of the conditioned space. So I'm not going to walk you through details, but these are the sizing outcomes when we run for a house in Austin, Texas, home, and we have orientation that is south on the top and west on the right. So we take the same home on top and orient it south, and then we turn it 90 degrees so it's facing west. The net heat gain that you have to address goes from 60,000 up to 83,000. You have 2 extra tons of sizing requirement just by turning the house 90 degrees. That's how important it is if you get orientation and don't consider it. If the HVAC sizing person for the entire subdivision just does one orientation for all the homes, they're going to be off by up to 2 tons just for orientation. Then take location in and out of the conditioned space. On top, we're in an unconditioned attic, and that's 74,000 BTUs. We drop down to 60,000 BTUs. We move the system in the conditioned space. 1 ton difference just based on where you're locating the heating cooling system. So if orientation and location in this house in Austin, Texas was a 3-ton impact. If I integrated those factors in optimizing the house, the orientation I optimized and the ducts and the heating cooling system location, I just reduced my system size 3 ton. I reduced my duct layout from an extensive layout to a very small compact layout. So many cost savings from doing the enclosure right. And next thing you have to do is consider innovations, ducts and conditioned space. We mentioned variable speed equipment, which is much more responsive, often inverter-driven equipment, like you'll see with LG later. Often variable speed is matched with systems called ductless mini splits. Voya will talk about that. And plug-and-play duct systems, we use more traditional HVAC systems, and we have to get to automated fault detection and diagnostics. Here you see a house, and the systems, the advanced systems, are so much smaller and more quiet. So a huge advantage for variable speed systems. A lot of times they're on the wall, and where it used to be perceived maybe a negative aesthetic, more and more as the manufacturers are making nicer and nicer looking units, I think that goes away. If it's still an issue, they have tray systems. Again, Voya will show you a lot of solutions, but you have lots of ways to get your HVAC system in the conditioned space, and that's what everyone needs to do. You can have it between the floors, you can have a drop ceiling, a raised ceiling, you can have an unvented crawl space, unvented attic, which is, we talked about a lot last week, the benefits of unvented attics, and mini splits where we have the units all like on the wall somewhere, and they're all inside the conditioned space. And then less desirable, we can have the system in the attic, but sitting on the rafters so we can insulate over the top and encapsulate them in the insulation. In yellow, I highlighted the ones I recommend to everyone listening: between floors, unvented crawl spaces, unvented attics, mini splits. So, but more about these with Voya later. But I do want to also tell you that there's a plug and play duct system out for more traditional HVAC systems, which is a standard 2.5 duct running everywhere, about 25, 30 CFM. And basically you just run as many ducts to a space as you need. So if you need 75 CFM, you might run 3 of those to that room with 3 supply grills. And you see basically it's just a very small, flexible. The only connections are at the plenum and at the boot, and they both snap in airtight, so there's no duct sealing. It just installs automatically. It takes the installer out of the equation. When they snap it to the plenum and they snap it to the boot, it's an airtight system. And when they stretch out the duct, the airflow is very good. The amount of waste and amount of requirements are so much less. The pallets for these systems are a fraction of the size. And again, you can see what a layout looks with the plug and play duct systems. So the only place where the ducts have connections, again, are at the boot, and it goes down to the plenum. So that's why it's much more airtight, better flow, they stretch them out. So a system to consider if you do traditional. The big thing though is when you go to high performance enclosure, you don't need the layout you see on the left, running everything to the extremities. You get a much more compact, lower cost system, much smaller ducts, much smaller heating cooling system. Everything's lower cost. And dehumidification is not extra credit when you go high performance. This is the normal hot, humid zone. Everything east of the Mississippi and Rockies, where you get humid, you're going to have to start thinking about dehumidification. I'm not going to go a lot here because I'm running a little bit longer than I want, but there are strategies: standalone dehumidifiers, ducted whole house dehumidifiers. Some variable speed air conditioning systems are being developed where they can throttle down and function as a dehumidifier as well as an air conditioner. Look out for that. The biggest thing I want to call your attention to is a set point for dehumidification has a huge impact on your energy cost. If I set my dehumidification for 60% versus 50%, the kilowatt hour consumption goes from 170 to 800 in one analysis we ran, which is 5 times more energy use when I keep my humidity at 50 versus 60, and 60% is absolutely comfortable. You don't need to run it at 50. So the set point will have a big factor. Automated fault detection and diagnostics essentially is a way of attaching sensors to your ducts and equipment, and then automatically knowing if the refrigerant charge is off, the airflow is off, if the static pressure is not right. So this is a tack-on system, but I hope eventually manufacturers just embed this into the equipment. It could create some havoc if the infrastructure is not installing systems correctly, where as soon as I leave, the lights are flashing and creating callbacks. So there's some challenges for how it gets integrated, but it's already out there, Sensi Predict by Emerson. It takes 15 minutes to install. I think their business model is a small fee to install it, and then like $9 a month for 24/7 monitoring of your system. So my wrap up here, recommendations, is that comfort is a system. You got to build for comfort. You got to optimize the enclosure. It's insanely better in every way to do that in terms of just the value to the customer. Then you got to design for comfort. We can't keep ignoring natural comfort, the free resources, the abundance of wind and solar energy. Then engineer for comfort. We got to optimize the HVAC system, sizing, selecting the right systems and variable speeds your friend in high performance enclosures, really solving the dehumidification, and then you have to deliver the comfort. You have to optimize the HVAC installation. The more you choose systems like mini splits, the quality installation becomes, you take the installer out of the equation for the most part. The more you go with more traditional systems, you have to account for all the extra costs it takes to get to a quality installation. And that's why I'm going to hand off now to Voya to talk about the LG air conditioning technologies, mini split technology, and all the innovation that goes into that. So thank you all today. We'll go into questions after Voya. I hope this made sense.
All right, Voya, the screen controls were sent just over to you right now.
I got them. Let me know when you can see.
Yeah, Zoom.
Let's see. I need to figure out which one. Where is my screen? Here we go.
See a Zoom interface and a browser behind it.
I am trying to figure out which. There it is. Okay. All right. You should be able to see it now.
Oh, looking great. Looking great.
That's the one you see? Okay. Let me go through and click through these quick slides. Because I really want to just kind of talk about a couple of really key things as far as the product goes. But really, predominantly, one of the main things I want to do is just, again, second everything that Sam just discussed and talked about. Back in the day with HVAC systems that were just extremely inefficient, you know, either on or off, you got really, really good comfort. Most folks didn't complain about it because you got exactly what you were looking for, right? You got cold air, and when it blew cold air, it blew cold air constantly. Cost a lot of money, very, very inefficient, but it was really a system designed to overcome a lot of the issues with leaky envelopes. As the cost of energy increased, and as we all know, the cost of energy will only continue to increase. I have yet to meet a company that went, oh my God, guys, we just figured out a way to become way, way more efficient, so we will sell our stuff for cheaper. That's never happened. So in the energy industry, we can expect the cost to continue to grow exponentially as it has historically. So that forces us for two reasons really to build tighter homes. One is energy. A bigger reason, in my opinion, is also health of the occupant, the comfort of the occupant. So as that continues to change, we see the push for efficiency of HVAC equipment, heating, cooling, the push for efficiency of water heating equipment, water delivery systems. And something's got to give, right? You can't just continue to say, oh yeah, we're going to magically make everything more efficient. You got to rob Peter to pay Paul, one way or another. So what that translates to is that as we make the air conditioning systems more efficient, we have to focus on sensible heat. And we have to do that at the detriment of latent heat. So really, The challenge to us as manufacturers is how do we make a system that is not only efficient at removing sensible heat or adding sensible heat, efficient at maintaining indoor moisture levels, because those are required for health, comfort, and longevity of our structures. What most of us in the building industry don't really think about very often is that once you have humidity levels below 35, you start to get cracking and warping of wood. So any of your wood furniture, wood finishes, everything starts to fail and suffer. That's a lot of money that we invested into a home to just sit there and watch it crack. The other part of that equation is where I live in Houston and a lot of other areas, including the Ohio River Valley, most of the coastal areas, especially during the shoulder seasons. When we get high humidity, we get mold and mildew growth. We get a perfect breeding ground for bacteria and viruses, which affects our health. So really, we want to maintain that 45 to 60% relative humidity level. So how do we do that efficiently with equipment that also doesn't cost an arm and a leg? So we have to think of newer strategies, but the first and foremost thing that we have to do is control, control, control. Control is always king. No matter what we do, no matter whether it's construction, whether it's our personal finances, whatever the heck it may be, we gotta control. And the best way to control it when it comes to home health is that old adage that Allison Bales wrote a whole book about, said a house has to breathe, or does it? I have to breathe too, but I would prefer to do it only through here where I can control it and where it's naturally meant for me to aspirate through. When my home breathes through various holes that I have no idea exist or how they change or what kind of rat poop may be there this week, not exactly the best situation. So we got to tighten up the envelope. We got to make sure that we are building homes that are able to withstand power loss for short periods of time without the comfort of the homeowners and the occupants getting way too out of whack. We also have to create homes that are resilient from the perspective of how long are they going to last? I mean, if we're going to spend 30 years paying for something, we all want to live in it for at least a little while before we have to invest money into it to repair it. And for at least most of us, we'd like to leave it to our kids too, without leaving them a money pit, but leaving them an actual piece of investment, right? Piece of our legacy. So you all know about the existing HVAC systems. I'm not going to belabor too much on inverter drives, what they are. I'm sure that if there are questions, please do go ahead and ask them in the chat, in the question format. Be more than happy to answer how standard air-to-air heat pumps work, how inverter-driven heat pumps work. What I'd really like to spend a little bit of time talking about, what are we doing and where are we going next? You all know by now that the refrigerants are changing. We are going from standard refrigerants that we've been used to since, 2002, roughly. 2001, 2002 was when 410A was first brought into market. I was a contractor at the time in the lovely state of Florida working with Carrier and Bryant Equipment, so for us it was Puron. And it was the next greatest thing. R22 was on its way out, and then today we're sitting here looking at R410A going, yep, it's got too much global warming potential, so it needs to go out. So what's the new thing coming in? For some folks, it's R32, like us. For other folks, it's R54B. Both of those refrigerants are very, very similar. They're both blended, what's considered A2L refrigerants, which means they're slightly flammable. That changes some of the things that we have to think about in commercial facilities where most of the line sets now have to be run through fire-rated chases. And in residential, we as a manufacturer just simply have to install some additional sensors and install safety devices in our equipment that if there is a leak and we do detect that leak, we can shut the unit down so that we're not adding a gas into our residence while folks are sleeping. Just simple, basic, common sense stuff, right? So what is next after this? Because as we know, the way things are changing, the way that the EPA rules, R32 and 454B are not going to stay here forever. If we get the next 5 to 6 years or so out of these refrigerants, we're going to be lucky. So what are the next ones? Well, we don't know yet. Some folks would love to bring in R290, which is essentially propane, zero global warming potential, great refrigerant, super efficient, abundant, but it's not there yet. So how do we bridge the gap between the folks that don't care and the folks that are like, I don't want anything that has to have a sensor and shut off in order for me to survive or be healthy? I don't want that in my home. So we can offer water systems. Air-to-water heat pumps are not new. They're something that has been used in Europe for, at least from the LG perspective, for the last 8 years. They have had a tremendous success. Really, really good quality product. When designed properly, it performs flawlessly and it is highly efficient. But it also opens us up to some really cool things on the new construction side as well as retrofit side, especially when it comes to heating predominant climates. And I'll also touch upon some food for thought for the cooling predominant climates in these air-to-water systems. So I'm going to skip to the next slide real quick, and I'm going to skip this one, and I'll come back to it in just a quick minute. But this is really what I want to touch on, is the monoblock air-to-water heat pump. This is a very, very flexible system. Currently for LG, it comes in 41,000, 48,000, and 55,000 BTU sizes. I personally am a huge advocate of simply eliminating the 41 and 48 because all three are essentially the same unit that is simply limited through software on the type end so that we can get the right certifications through AHRI. This is a system where I do not have to worry about oversizing. I do not have to worry about my minimum capacities. I do not have to worry about freezing my coil in cooling season. I can run cold water at 41 degrees, down to 41 degrees, on essentially what's an inverter-driven variable speed compressor coupled with a variable speed Grundfos pump. So both the compressor and the pump have the capacity to go down to 10% turn down and all the way to 100% turn up ratio. And all my system cares about is what is my water set point temperature and what is the water temperature of the water coming back to the outdoor unit. And it stages the compressor, speeds it up, slows it down, or the pump, or both as necessary to maintain flow and to maintain water temperature. So what does that do? It opens me up to like a world of possibilities on the indoor units. I can hook it up to a radiant floor system. I can hook it up to radiant base floor heating. I can hook it up to a hydronic cooling or heating air handler. I can even run domestic hot water. If I need to, let's see, just to jump another slide real quick here. If I need to, as you look here on the slide, I can also add a buffer tank or two buffer tanks if I want the ability in the shoulder seasons to quickly switch between heating and cooling. Now I've added extra capacity of water, which takes a lot longer for it to lose its temperature than air. So I now have the ability through a single piece to handle my domestic hot water needs, to handle my radiant needs for the deep winter in places where that thermal mass is key for efficiency. But I also can now add cooling, whether it be through a ducted system or through a wall mount or a ceiling cassette hydronic system that's ductless. I can add spot heating and spot cooling for the shoulder seasons where it doesn't pay off for me to turn on my inflow radiant system in a 10-inch, 14-inch concrete slab and heat up all of that concrete mass just for the temperature to change 3 hours later and for me to need a little bit of cooling. This simply gives me flexibility. The other thing that it does, it really gives me some more resiliency, because this system is super, super efficient. It has the ability to turn down and limit itself when it's operating on a battery backup or a generator backup, so that we are drawing a lower amount of energy from our backup source. We're maybe not providing the heating or cooling at exactly the comfort levels we want, but I can now extend the life of my storage system, of my battery or the generator, until power comes back up, or if it's overnight, until sun comes out and I start to generate power from my PV array. It gives me the ability to add resiliency, backup, and comfort through efficiency without having to add too much cost on. So all of this combined can essentially cost as much as just a standard in-floor heating system with an added-on secondary cooling system. But everything's being done through a single piece, much more efficiently. And I want to touch on water real quick. Since we're talking about water, yesterday in our in-person training in Dallas, I invited the folks there to just kind of challenge themselves on the way we think and why we think. And I told a brief story. It was a story about a young girl and her mom that, got together for Thanksgiving dinner, first Thanksgiving dinner in the daughter's house. And mom was impressed. She was like, "Oh my God, you cut your ham, you cut your ends of your ham off just like I do." I said, "Yeah, I learned it for." I never did ask you, why do you do that? She goes, "I have no idea. I mean, I just learned it from my mom, and that's the way we've always done it." Well, Grandma's here, let's go ask. So they went and they asked Grandma, and Grandma's answer was, "Well, I have no idea why y'all do it. The reason I did it is because my oven was small and I couldn't fit a whole ham in, so I had to cut the ends off in order to get the ham to actually fit in the pan that would fit in the oven." So the point is, how often do we do things just simply because that's the way we've always done it? And my question to the folks yesterday, which I'll present to you as well, is why do we put our water heaters in a basement, attic, or a garage? Typically at the point furthest away from where we actually need it. Typically, master suite or primary suite is going to be located the furthest away from the garage, or from that point in the attic that is usually above a garage. And then we have to add recirculating pumps and all kinds of crazy things so we can deliver water to the faucet quickly, but yet we're putting the water heating device as far away from it as we possibly can, in a space that is just out of the way, right? It's out of sight, out of mind. Most manufacturers design their water heaters ugly because it's quick, it's cheap, it's easy, and everybody hides the water heater. What if we didn't? What if we made the water heater to look like what you see on your screen? What if it was made to actually go in the living space? And if it was made so that it only runs at 42 decibels, which is equivalent to your modern day refrigerator? What if it was made to actually add a little bit of cooling into your space and help remove some of that heat generated by the refrigerator if we simply redesign the layout of the home and how we think about it? One of the questions that was brought up and we discussed yesterday was, for example, a European style cold room. What if I make a bigger pantry, if I locate my water heater inside the pantry? If I now turn that pantry into a European style cold room that adds value to the home and for the right client is worth quite a few dollars. But now I also take that heat away from the fridge and help the kitchen in those summer months maintain its temperature and stay a little cooler. Not necessarily an idea that works for every single situation, but something to think about, because there are situations where this could work and it could be more profitable for us as builders, but it could also be more energy efficient, more comfortable, and lower the energy usage or the bills for the consumer. So LG's water heater product, I think, is an amazing product. It's, let's see, I think I have, nope, I don't. Do I have a slide? No, I don't have a slide that goes into the specifics, unfortunately, and I don't really know that I have the time to go into specifics of it. But suffice to say, it's a little bit different than anything else on the market. So for anyone that is considering heat pump water heaters, here are the key points that I would like you to think about. Number one is, with the heat pump water heaters that are on the market today, vast majority of them are limited to about 4,000 BTU input from the heat pump itself. The moment we go a little bit outside of the design condition, these are no longer heat pump water heaters. They essentially turn into electric only water heaters. Reason for that is because a single speed heat pump, which is what 99% of heat pump water heaters in the market use, cannot operate at the same time as the electric heat strips. So it's either or. LG's water heater is a little different. We actually operate the heat pump primarily, and the heat strips, which there are 2 heat strips built into the water heater, are only used as additive or emergency backup. So in other words, the only time you will run just the heat strip is if the heat pump in the water heater fails. With the failure rate of these water heaters in Europe over the last 6-7 years, and then what we have here in the States in the less than 0.5% range, that's a pretty damn good record so far. The other part of it is that we can run in what we call turbo mode. So if we have a bunch of people over and we need a lot of water coming through, we can run the heat pump and the heat strips at the same time. So we get a much, much quicker recovery rate. If you look on the screen, you can see that in heat pump mode only, the 58-gallon water heater gives you a 76-gallon first hour pass-through, and the 80-gallon gives you a 94-gallon first hour response rate. Both of it at 3.9 to 3.93 UEF. So an extremely efficient, extremely quiet water heater that I would just like to simply again say, challenge yourselves to think a little bit outside the box. How can you incorporate this into the living space, or at least in the conditioned space, rather than an attic or a garage or a basement, unless, of course, you want to make that basement a focal point and you want to condition the basement. Perfectly okay. But when it looks like this, there's no need to hide it. And then on the water heating side, from the air to water heat pump, please shoot me questions. Ask me anything as far as that comes to mind. I'm actually about 2 weeks away from putting one of these air to water heat pumps with a hydronic air handler in my own home, predominantly because it gives me the ability to lower my fan speed in a hot, humid climate to super, super low, while still maintaining a 41-degree coil. I can get dehumidification out of that system like no one's business, without having to worry about freezing my coil, without having to worry about oil return, without having to worry about any of the 17,000 things that I have to worry about when I slow my air-to-air heat pump down to extremely low speeds. That thing has to protect itself, so I can never really dial in the comfort the way I want to. And then when I can do that with maybe a 10 to 15% premium over a standard air-to-air heat pump, I mean, I just basically added a ton more comfort, ton more efficiency, and something that's going to future-proof my home for the next 15 to 20 years easily, for that 10, 15% premium. So any questions? More than happy to answer.
Thank you, Voya. I wanted to stick with this for just 1 second. You talked about, hey, you don't have to hide this thing. I was just curious, sometimes, and you remember probably from energy code hearings and that, you've got, you had to have rooms, right? Okay, you got to have this mechanical room and it had to be ventilated and all that sort of thing. How does that then work with this product here? What are there any of those kind of concerns, or has that kind of been eliminated?
So no, those concerns are still always going to be there, but they are, for the most part, misunderstood. We recommend and ask for 700 cubic feet of space if you are going to use this piece of equipment in an unvented space that is not in any way or shape or form allowed to breathe, right? So if I have a completely closed room with a completely closed door, I need to have 700 cubic feet of space. That is strictly so that this unit doesn't overcool that space so much that it starts to affect the efficiency and the performance of the equipment itself. This unit is going to put off about 120 to 150 CFM, and let's call it about a 12 to maybe 18 degree delta between air incoming and air coming out of the heat pump water heater. So how do we overcome that? The unit takes air in on the top. As you can see here, all of our connections are on the side. The only connection on the top is going to be power. And there's what you can't see here, there's a washable filter right here on the very top that just slides out. That's where the incoming air is. It releases air on the back side, very top here on the back side. We sell a kit that allows you to duct incoming air, outgoing air, or both. It does take an 8-inch duct if you choose to do so. So for example, when I said earlier, like a scenario of, let's put a pantry next to the kitchen, next to the fridge, right, which is where pantry is typically going to be, and let's put this unit kind of in the corner. Let's call it a back left corner of the pantry. It's not going to take up a whole lot of space. We can still have shelves and things around it. We only need enough space to be able to access these side connections for our water coming in, water coming out, and our drain. That's it, our condensate drain. Those are the only things that we have to make connections for. Let's say we come in and we simply take a duct and we duct the air from the kitchen, pick up that hot air off the fridge, and we duct it to come into this water heater, and then let it blow freely into the pantry with just a simple pass-through, just a passive pass-through return on the lower side or the higher side of the pantry, same wall as the kitchen, right? We're now still allowing that unit to breathe. We are creating a colder pantry than what you would normally have. So it's going to be colder, but it's not going to be so much colder that we have to worry about condensating temperatures. Other part is, let's say you are building over a crawl space, over an encapsulated crawl space. You could use this unit to condition that encapsulated crawl space, right? So you could duct it both ways. So there's multiple ways that we can overcome that. One of the simplest and cheapest is going to be what Matt Reisinger is doing in his new home that he's currently, not his new home, but a new home that he's currently constructing, where they're using this product in a small tight closet with a simple louvered door. That's it. As long as we have a louvered door, we have a pad for that air to saturate, and we're good.
Gotcha. Okay. I do want to get to another question, though. Our friend Zoran, who lives up in Canada, he's asking about cold climates, and he wanted to know, can ERVs humidify the air enough in winter?
Okay, so ERV. I'm gonna take a little bit of a tangent on that to say that yes, thank you, and I'm glad you're asking about ERVs in winter, because I am not a fan of HRVs in any climate. main difference between an ERV and an HRV is whether or not they allow moisture to pass through the core. Even in cooling predominant climates, I don't like HRV simply because I want to keep my humidity inside the space. And with an HRV, all I'm doing is I'm just straight dumping it out. I'm not allowing any of that moisture to come back into the incoming airstream, whereas an HRV can. ERV can. ERV is not going to humidify the air. All it is going to do is allow you to retain a small portion of the humidity that is already inside your space. So if you are maintaining a 50% humidity inside your living space and you're using an ERV, and let's say the outdoor humidity is at 25%, really the best you're going to be able to do is maybe recover with a good ERV, 50% of that humidity that would have been expelled. You're going to be able to recover it, so you will still drop your humidity levels inside your space, but not as quickly as you would with an HRV. I hope that answers the question. When it comes to maintaining or keeping humidity up in a heating predominant dry climate, you will have to have some sort of supplemental humidification, just like for me in Texas, where I want to keep humidity out of my space. I have to have dehumidification supplemental, because while an ERV will help remove a lot of the moisture out of that incoming airstream, it's still not going to remove enough for me to maintain space conditions. So the best that I can say is think of an ERV as a ventilation device, simply a managed ventilation device, just like a nose is for me, for my face. I don't want to breathe through my ears. So that's really all it does. HVAC removes humidity when it runs. Do I want to count on it as a dehumidifier? No, absolutely not, because it only removes humidity incidentally. It's not meant to do those things. So the best that we can do for comfort of ourselves, our homeowners, folks that we build these homes for, is understand that they care about health. They care about their comfort. And as long as we educate them that each piece of equipment is designed to do exactly one job, AC to condition, heater to heat, ERV to ventilate, dehumidifier to dehumidify, humidifier to humidify. As long as they understand that, folks are willing to install just about anything we recommend. They're willing to pay the money as long as we can explain to them why we are doing what we're doing. And we better have a good why.
Right. Yep, Sam talks about that a lot. If anybody has any questions for Sam or Voya, please go ahead and send those in. This is kind of the final call for questions. Sam, did you have anything for Voya at all?
Well, I just want to correct that ERVs don't dehumidify at all, 0% dehumidification. All they do is reduce the moisture coming into the house, so they reduce the dehumidification load. They don't dehumidify. So normally if you ventilate, you're bringing in moisture. What an ERV does is it kind of collects on the moisture that would come in, let's say in a hot, humid summer day, and transfers it to the airflow going out, being exhausted. So you have less humidity coming in than you would without an ERV. So zero dehumidification from ERV, but you do reduce the moisture load on the house, so that dehumidification is not as much. That's all I want to add, but otherwise we're good.
Now, Sam, just for our conversation, what are your thoughts on my feelings and my comments on HRVs in a cold, dry climate where we need to humidify versus an ERV? I mean, I'd love to hear your perspective on it. Just because I'm a firm believer in what an HRV is and what an ERV is, doesn't mean that you have not experienced something different. So what's your thoughts on that as it comes to retaining the moisture in a home when you actually want to.
Yeah, I'm in absolute lockstep with you, Voya. I just hope that I'm sensing that there's almost a complete transition from HRVs being used to ERVs. I know that there's an extra cost, the core is more expensive, but there are too many benefits. With climate change, even the northern regions of the country are getting worse summer conditions. You benefit from the ERV at that time of year, and winter, you just don't want to get the house that dry. It's just, you want to, as you say, trap all the moisture you have, so it creates healthier living conditions, less floor shrinking, so you have cracks and hardwood floors. So I'm in lockstep with you.
Awesome.
All right. Well, I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up for now. We are halfway through this series, but that also means we've got half of it still to go. So our next seminar is going to take place next Thursday, October 31st at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to be talking about the future, and we won't even need a DeLorean to do so. Thank you so much for attending today, and thank you once again to Schneider Electric, Jinko Solar, Panasonic Healthy Indoor Living Solutions, and LG HVAC and Air Conditioning Technologies for their generous sponsorships. Until we meet again, stay safe, stay healthy, and take care, everyone. So long.
Thank you.
Goodbye.